The first two phases have been finished, and now it's time to talk about Phase 3. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac channel. I'm your host, MrEliMac, and today I'm going to be continuing our What If the MCU was the DCCU series, and we're on Phase 3. Yes, the second longest phase in terms of the MCU, but now we are gonna be doing it with the DCCU. But before I actually get into the pitch, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. So yes, again, we're in Phase 3 of the DC Cinematic Universe. For anyone who doesn't know, this entire idea is inspired by Hector Navarro and his friends coming up with sort of movie titles, and then me taking those movie titles and then just creating my own universe from it. And so yeah, we're gonna be getting into Phase 3. This is sort of the phase where it starts changing from the initial idea that Hector and his friends had. So very much I'm prepared to very much show you all sort of the newer ideas that I have that Hector and his friends initially didn't have. So without any further ado, let's get into the pitch for What If the MCU was the DCCU Phase 3. And so, as you all know, the MCU's third phase starts with Captain America Civil War. So we're going to be going into that idea a little bit with Superman Tower of Babel. Yes, the infamous Tower of Babel story that had Ra's al Ghul going into the computers of Batman and sort of taking out the entire Justice League with all of Batman's failsafes. However, we're not going to be doing that specific thing of Ra's al Ghul being the one to do it. No, we're going to be doing it a little bit similar to Justice League Doom, where it's the Legion of Doom taking on the Justice League. But even then, at this point, the Justice League is changed up. It's not the original 7. No, this Justice League is very much Superman, the Flash, Black Canary, Green Arrow, Steel, Red Tornado, and I think those are the only members. I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, Martian Manhunter is another member of the team. So yeah, it's sort of those 7 as our Justice League. But instead of it being Vandal Savage in control of the Legion of Doom, instead this is the movie where Lex Luthor fully becomes a big bad guy and he starts wearing his Lex Luthor armor suit, and he's in control of the Legion of Doom, or like just the Legion, or whatever you want to call that team. And it's Lex Luthor again, Superman. For the Flash's villain, it's Captain Cold. For Black Canary, it's Lady Shiva. For Green Arrow, it's the Dark Archer, or Merlin. For Martian Manhunter, it is Human Flame. I'm actually saving his brother. For Red Tornado, it is Red Volcano. And for Steel, it is Scorpio, who is the sort of main antagonist and the main archenemy of Steel. Again, Scorpio was a character I didn't know a lot about, so when I had Steel on my team, I was like, oh, he needs his evil analog. And then I looked up Scorpio and I was like, oh, there he is. And so yeah, it's sort of very much Lex Luthor getting the plans of Batman's failsafes against the Justice League and using them against the Justice League. And we do get a Legion of Doom versus Justice League battle in the movie as well. But ultimately, I will ultimately have Superman feeling betrayed by Batman and being like, hey, why did you do this? And Batman's like, I did it because I can't trust anyone on the Justice League. After everything that I've been through, after everything that has happened, I cannot trust this team. What if you, Superman, were to go off the rails? What if you were to start being taken control over by someone like Brainiac? Or what if Lex Luthor were to try to take over you? What if something like that happened? And Superman's like, that's not gonna happen. And Bruce is like, I can't trust that. And ultimately, we would get the ultimate Batman versus Superman fight that it seems like everyone would want to do. I mean, the only reason why I'm having it in this movie and it's even happening at all is because we got the big Captain America versus Iron Man fight, similar to Civil War. And so here's my Captain America and my Iron Man analog, Superman and Batman, fighting each other. And ultimately, it would have Batman nearly beating Superman for the simple fact of I would have Batman wearing some sort of the armor similar to the one in The Dark Knight Returns, but it's more like you can obviously see the kryptonite, and you see why Superman's a little bit more weaker than Batman in this instance. But ultimately, Batman wouldn't do anything crazy. He would just go underground and disappear, and that would lead into a MCU TV show that I have in my head. But I'm not gonna talk about the TV shows. If you want me to talk about the MCU TV shows, just post a comment down below, and I will talk about some of the ideas that I have. But ultimately, it would be Superman getting bested by Batman. Batman goes underground to do his little thing over on the side. And ultimately, the Legion of Doom, including Lex Luthor, would finally be put in jail. And that is the entire thing with Superman Tower of Babel. The mid-credit scene would introduce the idea of a new hero that would be introduced sort of midway through. Mainly, not even a hero, it's more of a character. And the character's name is Billy Batson. That would be the mid-credit scene. And also in the post-credit scene, we would be seeing a kid watching that from his cell phone. And the kid would be living all the instances that happened between the Justice League and Legion of Doom. He'd be watching it from his cell phone, living all the way in Dakota City. And that kid would be known as Virgil Hawkins. So I'm setting up Shazam and Static in one movie, and that is Superman Tower of Babel. Anyway, we move on to the Doctor Strange analog, which I think is all obvious to a lot of people. The Doctor Strange analog would be Dr. Fate. However, Dr. Fate would not be Kent Nelson, and I purposely did this because I didn't want it to be Kent Nelson getting the helmet and then learning how to be Dr. Fate. I wanted that story because that's sort of the Doctor Strange story, and that's the Doctor Strange movie, so I wanted the idea of having someone who had to learn to be Dr. Fate. And so there was a character that was introduced around this time, maybe a year earlier, whose name was Khalid Nassour, and he was sort of the new, like, the DC Rebirth Dr. Fate, and I would have him be the main character of this movie. I would have Kent Nelson also in this. I would have Kent Nelson in this movie, but he would be more of the Ancient One figure in this movie. And Wotan, who's sort of like the main antagonist of the Dr. Fate stories, he would also be in this movie as well. But he would be the Mordo character, where it's like he is an ally to Dr. Fate, but then, you know, near the end of the movie becomes an antagonist, and then we go into sort of that stuff maybe in the future. But ultimately, the main antagonist would be Ian Karkull, who was a major antagonist for Dr. Fate, and I believe, like, the Justice League, and sort of he would be the Caecilius character who would be trying to find this even worse villain to come into the world and defeat Dr. Fate. I can't remember who it is. There is a villain that's sort of the big magic villain to Dr. Fate, but I can't remember the name. Anyway, Ian Karkull would try to get the Lord of Chaos to come in, but Dr. Fate, being a member of the, like, under the Lord of Order, would sort of be that antagonist. And we would have Nabu being in the helm of Fate, and that would be sort of the story of just Kent Nelson trying to teach Khalid into, hey, this is how you deal with everything that's up there. And yeah, that's the Dr. Fate movie. And for the mid-credit scene, in this one it would be more of just Dr. Fate learning a little bit more about his history, and then he would find a book that would belong to Kent Nelson, because I would kill Kent Nelson in the movie, and I would have him see a picture of Kent, like, from a long time ago, maybe from the 80s or maybe even 90s, with him in a team, and Khalid asking, "Oh, Nabu, who's that?" And Nabu would be like, "That was a team of justice that Kent was a part of, but it's meant to be in the past, never to be brought up again." Hinting at the Justice Society. Would the Justice Society play a big part in Phase 3? No, that's something for the future. But then the post-credit scene, which had Mordo going over and taking the magic from someone, Wotan would do something like that as well, and sort of start learning the magics of the Order of Chaos. But then we go over to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which the analog for that would be the Green Lantern Corps' Sinestro Corps War, and this would be the big movie of the Green Lantern Corps versus the Sinestro Corps War, because at the post-credit scene for the Green Lantern Corps, Sinestro would get the Yellow Lantern ring and he would start his own corps, and that would very much be the movie where The Sinestro Corps is actually like dominating this battle. Like they get introduced at the very beginning of the movie and they just wreak havoc on Oa. They kill some Green Lanterns. Tomar Ray is killed in this movie, and it's our 5 main characters like finding rings and being like, hey, we need to give these rings to people and we need to like recruit, and sort of we would recruit more characters. This is where we would get Guy Gardner, Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, Sodom Yacht, and Kat Matu. And that's sort of where we get those new Green Lanterns, and we start developing the Green Lantern Corps more outside of our main 5. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it would have the Green Lanterns that we know and the newer Green Lanterns teaming, like, being able to best the Sinestro Corps War, and even having John Stewart and Sinestro having a big old fight, with John Stewart winning, not killing Sinestro in the end. For a mid-credit, there were so many post-credit scenes in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I just can't, like, pick one. Just decide. Green Lantern, it had, one of them is the Green Lanterns, like, discovering something about anti-life equation, and that's a red flag for them. Another one is maybe a hint at the future villain of the next one. Something about maybe Parallax. I don't know. Guardians of the Galaxy had so many, Volume 2 had so many post-credit scenes that trying to properly fit the Green Lantern Corps, all of those into the Green Lantern Corps Sinestro Corps War, that is so hard, and that would be a lot of work to do. And I'm not ready to do that. But anyway, we're moving on to the next film, which is Spider-Man Homecoming. And my analog for Spider-Man Homecoming is Shazam, because I hinted at Billy Batson, and so here is the Shazam movie, because this was the one that was someone else's character, and with Hector and all that, but for this one I was thinking, I think Shazam fits Spider-Man Homecoming better, because Spider-Man is sort of someone that looks up to Iron Man in the MCU, and in this one Shazam looks up to Superman, and so that's sort of the idea of the story. And so we have Shazam getting his powers and trying to be like Superman, but it's not working exactly the way he wants. He's trying to hide to his family, which are the Shazam kids, but the main antagonist is Dr. Zatanna. Basically, the idea, I would say, is that, you know, the Shazam movie that you saw in 2018? Just put it here in 2017, because that's basically the best analogy that I could use for it. So yeah, the mid-credit scene, which the mid-credit scene in Spider-Man Homecoming was the Vulture speaking with Scorpion. So for this one, it's just the Wizard feeling a tingling sensation inside of him, feeling a darker champion returning to Earth, and that hints at Black Adam, maybe for the sequel. And then the end credit scene is just Freddy and Billy are doing something crazy and what kids would do, and then that's the final post-credit scene. Sort of how in Homecoming it's just Captain America just like, I'm patient. So do something that's really non-consequential to the bigger story of the MCU. And then we move on to the Thor Ragnarok analog, which is Wonder Woman Twilight of the Gods. Twilight of the Gods is the name of the sort of apocalypse for Greece, and that's what we're getting here. Which, again, we're sort of getting a more comedic feel because Taika Waititi, but ultimately it would be Wonder Woman and Donna Troy teaming up with Aquaman and Tempest because of Aquaman's connection to Poseidon and like being a descendant of Poseidon and stuff. And so we're getting all that. We're getting more Aquaman backstory sort of in the Wonder Woman movie, and they're sort of teaming up together to stop the big bad, which is Cersei. And she's the one that's really pushing the end of the world sort of thing. Ares comes back as well as sort of like a major supporting character and an ally to Wonder Woman again. But also, like, one of the main people that's helping Cersei is Ocean Master. And Ocean Master is sort of one of the people, like, he's the Grand Master in this movie, where Wonder Woman has to go to Atlantis and do the Atlantis stuff, big story in Atlantis. And that's when we get a lot more development of Aquaman and his character in Atlantis. And then we move on back to Amazon, where it's Aquaman, like the heroes beating Cersei. Also, this is the movie where Queen Hippolyta dies, similar to how Odin dies in Thor Ragnarok. And the mid-credit scene is Granny Goodness sort of appearing in Themyscira and sort of getting ready to push the Infinity War-esque story. And then the post-credit scene is Atlantis and them fully, like, putting Ocean Master in jail, and Ocean Master being like, well, you know, there's always next year or the year after. I can do this again, maybe. You know, in reference to him trying to take over the world, or take over Atlantis, because he's done that multiple times in my headcanon. And then we move on to the next film, which is Black Panther, and for Black Panther, the analog is Static Shock. And I love Static Shock so much. I think he's a character that should be made into a movie, and I feel like he would fit this part very well, because he is a black teenager and someone that a lot of people can look at as sort of like the Miles Morales, Black Panther character, and I think he very much fits that role, and I think it would be a great, again, it was such a great character to have as sort of like a main tentpole character is Static. And his main antagonist in this movie would be Eben, who is just a gangster who is trying to take over Dakota City with bang babies. And that's sort of the entire point of the villainous story, where it's Static having to take down Eben and his gang, with Richie sort of helping him as a supporting character. He's not Gear, he's just a supporting character, and we'll also have the idea of how it was supposed to be in the original cartoon show, where Richie was supposed to be homosexual, he would be homosexual, and he would be gay in this movie. And that sort of, for lack of a better term, that is the Static Shock movie. The mid-credit scene would very much be Static meeting or getting, like, information from some other teenager in the world. Maybe Shazam. I don't know that yet. I don't know all the little details I could be using. And then in the post-credit scene, that's when we get another revelation of the people of Apocalypse coming to Earth, and this one would be Kanto, the main assassin for Apocalypse and for Darkseid, coming to Metropolis and being like, I guess this is where it all begins. And that's the end of Static Shock. And then we get into the Avengers Infinity War movie, which is Justice League Darkseid War. And in this movie, we're getting more Apocalypse villains, we're getting parademons, we're getting who did I write down? I had so many, because this entire time Glorious Godfrey would be on Earth trying to sow seeds of doubt. We would get Kalibak, we would get Darkseid, again I said Granny Goodness, she appears in Wonder Woman Twilight of God. Kanto, he appeared in Static Shock. So they would start taking down the Earth, and we would have the heroes going out, trying to save the day, trying to fight everyone. We would have the Green Lantern Corps coming back, or the main characters from the Green Lantern Corps, they would come to Earth and say, hey, there's been a lot of stuff that's been happening in outer space dealing with Apocalypse and Darkseid and all that, and we've realized this all converging to this planet, to Earth. So we're going to come and we're going to help you. And so we're getting every single hero right now trying to stop all the forces of Apocalypse. They're trying to fight parademons. They're trying to do everything right now. But ultimately, I would say around the point where Vision fully dies, that's where we have Darkseid appearing on Earth. Because throughout the movie, Darkseid's entire plot is going throughout the galaxy and throughout the universe, trying to find more information about the anti-life equation, and he's trying to solve the equation in his head. And that's when he goes on a planet that's a little bit more out there, sort of Sector 666, maybe Ismalt, where he discovers the final piece of the equation is actually on Earth. And that's when he boom tubes all the way to Earth. And that's when he goes up against Superman. And we have Darkseid and Superman going at it. Boom, boom, punch after punch after punch. Boom, boom, big fight, big fight. Ultimately, it has Darkseid besting Superman. And Darkseid just looks into Superman's eyes, and he looks at him and he says, so, your death is the answer to the anti-life equation. Interesting. And so Darkseid just holds him and snaps his neck. Superman is dead. And then suddenly darkness surrounds planet Earth, everything begins to go dark. And that's when we see Dr. Fate appearing, apparating. He grabs Superman and he apparates away. And we go back and we cut to the Fortress of Solitude, where Batman has been hiding, trying to solve this thing, trying to solve a problem, because Batman in this movie has been gone this entire movie, and he's there at the very end hiding in the Fortress of Solitude. Not really hiding, but sort of getting access to the Fortress of Solitude, because he's someone that Superman used to trust, and so Batman has access to the Fortress of Solitude. He can find ways to get inside. And so Batman has been learning more, trying to gather more information about the forces of Apocalypse, when Dr. Fate appears to him with Superman, and Dr. Fate just looks at him and tells him, "You have to get out. You're the only people that can save planet Earth." And Dr. Fate raises his hand, and Ankh appears behind Batman and just takes Superman and Batman away. And then Ankhs start to appear in other places. Green Lantern and the Flash disappear. Aquaman and Wonder Woman disappear. Martian Manhunter disappears. And then the final shot we see is of Earth from a space view, just covered in darkness. Then we fade to black. And a post-credit scene has a hat on a stage, just resting. And so suddenly we hear some words spoken backwards, and the hat disappears. And we're hinting at Zatanna. Wink. And so we move on to the next film in this very right after Darkseid War, and that is the Ant-Man and the Wasp analog, which is the Atom and Hawkgirl. And in this movie, it has Ryan Choi getting a little bit closer to saving Ryan Palmer, getting more information about the microverse, and we also get the introduction of Kendra Saunders as Hawkgirl. Now, Kendra Saunders was in the first Atom movie, but in this one, she fully embraces Hawkgirl after discovering more about what her past life was, and that's when we get the introduction of Carter Hall, who is someone going to be someone from the past, from her past, that she didn't realize who he was, and we're getting more of a revelation about the Hawkgirl, Hawkman, like prophecy stuff. But again, in this version, Carter is somewhat older than Kendra, so having a relationship would be a little bit awkward to such, even though, again, age is just a number. But ultimately, it's Kendra and Ryan that are the main relationship of this movie. And the main antagonist, sort of the Walton Goggin character, is the Calculator, because he's trying to get more, like, stuff from the Atom and steal technology from the Atom. And another major antagonist, Ghost character, is Gentleman Ghost, because Gentleman Ghost is a major antagonist to the Hawkman series, and I really wanted a Hawkman villain to sort of be one of the villains in this. I wanted sort of a Atom and a Hawkman villain, and so we're putting them in this movie right here. And ultimately, it's just Gentleman Ghost trying to find a way to bring back his own body and not to be dead anymore. And so it's very much the main thing. They try to help him. They try to do some good things, but Gentleman Ghost ultimately still being the villainous character that he is, ultimately gets defeated by Hawkgirl and the Atom and is forced to disappear forever, and the Calculator goes to jail. And ultimately Ryan and Kendra save Ray Palmer, and Ray and Carter sort of meet because they're friends. Because in my version, Carter and Ray are friends. Like the Atom and Hawkman dynamic is right there, and sort of that's the end of the movie. We all celebrate, but then we get into our mid-credit scene, which sort of shows Ryan, Kendra, Carter, and Ray hanging out together, just hanging out on a building, talking about the past and such. And that's when we start seeing sort of the darkness begin to take over the planet Earth, and we see an Ankh appear behind Ryan and Kendra, and they disappear, and boom, that happens. And the post-credit scene is just different people on planet Earth trying to fight against Darkseid, but it's mainly just Darkseid sitting on a chair watching. And then we cut over to the Captain Marvel analog, which is Zatanna. And this movie is not going to be a lot like Captain Marvel, where it's set in the past and we get a lot of like flashback, like the main settings is mainly set in the past. No, instead, this movie is set during the Darkseid, like taking over, and the main antagonist is Felix Faust, who is sort of working with Darkseid, who is like bent the knee to Darkseid and very much just trying his hardest to sort of just, yeah, I'm working for Darkseid, go Darkseid. And another major antagonist in the movie is Benjamin Raymond, who again is another person who's like, no, Darkseid isn't gonna kill me, so if I bend the knee to him, so I'm bending the knee, so I'm gonna help out Darkseid. But we have the character of Zatanna, who is very much making sure that she stops all the people, because a lot of this story is magic based. Felix Faust, Benjamin Raymond, all magic based characters, and so we're getting that. And because of that, Darkseid is sort of helping them get demons to appear on planet Earth. The demons being Wrath, Ghast, and Abnegazer. Those are the main demons sort of that are the main sort of antagonist-based characters. And ultimately, in the end, Zatanna is able to beat Benjamin and Felix, make sure the demons go back to hell, and that's when we sort of get the point where we got in the post-credit scene where the hat is sort of gone and Zatanna is sort of given a message by Dr. Fate being like, hey, you're needed elsewhere. You need to go here. And when she sees it written out, she speaks the words backwards, and we see her grab the hat, and poof, gone. And the Darkseid stuff happens. And then in the mid-credit scene, it's just, we see Wonder Woman and Aquaman just together being like, where are we? Where are we? We don't know where we are. And that's when Zatanna appears and says, I think I might be able to help you out. And then that's the mid-credit scene. The post-credit scene that's when we catch up with Batman and with Superman holding him, just looking around, and it's just a desolate wasteland. And again, them wondering where they are, and that's when they hear a voice saying, welcome to New Genesis. And they turn, and we never see the face. It's just Batman turns around, and we cut to black. And then that's when we get to the Avengers Endgame, which is Justice League Rebirth. And the majority of this movie, is just set on a desolate wasteland of New Genesis. Because the reason why New Genesis is a desolate wasteland is because Darkseid has already destroyed it. Darkseid has beaten New Genesis. And the only survivors are Mr. Miracle, Orion, Big Barda, and Forager. Forager is with Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, and Flash. Forager is there, like, trying to help them because Forager's from the lower place of New Genesis, and that's where Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, and Flash get teleported to, and Green Lantern's ring is not, like, working properly. It's ran out of gas, for a lack of a better term. And so Forager's trying to help them through New Genesis and trying to help them to get to the main capital city. Wonder Woman and Aquaman are with Zatanna, and Zatanna is sort of telling them, like, hey, this is what happened on Earth after the Darkseid stuff started happening. So I'm here because Dr. Fate told me you're going to need some help, so I'm here to help. And then we go over to the Atom and Hawkgirl, who appear next to Batman and Superman, who are discovered by Orion, Big Barda, and Mr. Miracle. And when they appear, Orion's like, no, we cannot trust them. They are probably agents of Apocalypse, and we should not trust them. Whereas Mr. Miracle, who's a little bit more like, they wouldn't be here if they were agents of Apocalypse. They would not be here after everything that they did. And then that's when we start getting we get more of the backstory of what happened, and ultimately Forager is able to bring Flash, Martian Manhunter, and Green Lantern to the heroes in the main city. Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Zatanna are able to get to the main city, and that's when they think of a plan of like, look, this may not work, but we need to go back in time to save the day. We need to go back in time and stop Darkseid before any of this happens. And everyone's like, well, how are we going to do that? And then Barry's like, well, when I first fought Eobard Thawne, he was able to run back to the past. he was able to time travel just by running as fast as he could. If he could do it, I could do it. So I'm gonna try to do it. And that's sort of where that idea comes. And they're like, well, you need to... The only way you can run that fast is if you get to a certain point. And you can't do that with your own speed. And so that's when the Atom comes in and says... Or Ryan Troy comes in and says, well, I think there's a way you could. Maybe if you ran like on sort of a treadmill of sorts. And Mr. Miracle's like, well, we have technology that could potentially help you go back in time. It's like, cool, great. Let's try that. And so the Atom, Flash, Mr. Miracle all come together, and even Martian Manhunter all come together to try to create the cosmic treadmill. Whereas Batman the entire time is grieving Superman. They even bring Superman to like a table of sorts. And Wonder Woman's like with them consoling Batman, and Batman's like, no, I did this. It's because of me, because if I wouldn't have created those failsafe programs, then we would still be together, and like the team would still be together. I wouldn't have to worry about all of this. I'm the reason why Clark is dead. I could have helped him. I could have been by his side. And Wonder Woman's like, no, you did not kill Clark. Darkseid did. And the only way we can stop Darkseid is if we can get this plan to work. And then Forager comes in and is like, well, look, I know this may not really help, but there is some technology on New Genesis that... And Orion's like, no, do not tell him about this technology. It is sacred, secret technology. And Batman's like, what is this technology? Tell me about it. And so we get an entire revelation of New Genesis has technology to bring people back from the dead. The only problem is that they haven't used it in so many years because Darkseid sort of destroyed everything. And so the only time this will work is one last time. And so Mr. Miracle, Orion, Big Barda didn't want to waste it on other people if it would only work one time. And so Batman's like, no, we're using it now. If you want someone that can beat Darkseid, this is the man. And Orion's like, well, if he could have beaten Darkseid, why did Darkseid kill him? If Darkseid could have been beaten by Superman, how is Superman dead? And Batman's like, I don't care. We are bringing him back to life. And Big Barda's like, look, Orion, I understand why you're a little bit mad at Darkseid, but if Superman, this human being... And Batman's like, he's not human. He's from Krypton. And then that's when everyone's like, what? He's from Krypton? Kryptonians are supposed to be extinct. Like, well, he's not. He's the last son of Krypton. And then that's when we're like, all right, we'll save him. We're going to save Superman. And then that's when we get into two separate plots. We get the saving Superman plot, and we get the time travel plot. And so they get the cosmic treadmill to work, and then Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, and the Flash go back in time to when Mr. Miracle says, and Mr. Miracle even joins them. It's like, hey, we need to go to this exact moment, because this is when he first discovers the anti-life equation. We have to go here, that way we can stop Darkseid from ever discovering what the anti-life equation even is. So they go back in time and they go to stop it. But ultimately, when they're going back to our time, back to New Genesis, Flash is killed by Darkseid. Barry Allen dies. And they are able... But Green Lantern, like, because they were given technology to where... and come back to present, they go back in time. And John is just in tears. Because in my again, in this version, Flash and Green Lantern are always friends. And just John is broken. Because his best friend is dead. The Flash is dead. And he watched it happen. And he couldn't stop it. And so Mr. Miracle's like, that plan didn't work. That was the only thing we could do, and we didn't stop it. And then suddenly, forces of apocalypse start to appear in New Genesis. And Mr. Miracle just looks up and is just like, no, not again. And we get to where the Justice League members that are here are working together and getting ready to a final stand against the forces of apocalypse. But Darkseid doesn't come out. It's Darkseid going to the castle, and it's like, my Lord Darkseid has mentioned how you tried to stop him all those years ago. Why would you even think about doing that? You do realize you've just hastened your extinction. Orion, Mr. Miracle, Barda, Forager. The only reason why you were alive is because Darkseid allowed it to happen. But now, you're all going to die at the hands of Darkseid. And so, Darkseid goes back, and then we see parademons start to fly out, and we see everyone get ready, and Wonder Woman gets her sword, gets her shield, everyone start getting ready, and everyone's there ready. But Batman doesn't go out, he's still by Superman's side. And Zatanna, who I would hint that they had a past, Batman the entire time is like, no, I have to make sure Clark is okay. I have to make sure he comes back. Zatanna's like, Bruce, it's too late. We can't wait. We have to go do it. Go to them now. And Bruce is like, no! Clark is the only one who can help us. I failed Clark. I can't let him die. I can't keep him here. I can't. And so Zatanna's like, alright. But just know that we're running out of time. And so the early first forces of parademons come out, and the heroes just fight against them. All the heroes that we have now, and Darkseid's just sitting in his ship, or sitting in the back, behind everyone, waiting. And we see Granny Goodness like wanting to join the fight, Calabox wanting to join, but Darkseid's making sure they do not join the fight. And then suddenly, boom! And everyone just looks back. A black blur just zooms in the air, and we just see parademons get decimated. And that's when we see, flying in the sky, wearing a black suit and a silver S, Superman has returned. And that's when Darkseid stands up. He says, good. Now it's a real fight. Or lets his hand down. Calabox, Granny Goodness, some of the major lieutenants start running forward. And then that's when we see Onks everywhere. Everywhere appearing behind our main Justice League members. And we see heroes from everywhere. And because I'm keeping my TV shows a little bit more connected, we see some heroes from TV shows as well. Like Nightwing, and, I'm gonna hint at this, Starfire, Beast Boy, Cyborg, Raven. Then we get some other heroes and more and more and more. Trust me, every single hero that has debuted in this universe will appear at this point. And we just see Superman zooming through. All the heroes are running. And we see even Guy, like before this, Guy tosses John a lantern and say, hey, I think you forgot this. John charges up and he's like, alright, let's go. And again, we get the big, like, running sort of challenge of the Super Friend style. Boom! And we get the big fight. But the only person absent is Batman. Because he found a device. And it was the device that the heroes used to bring them back to present time. However, he's reoriented it. That way, he can go back into the past. Because he's that smart, he can do that. And Superman sees Batman. And Batman's basically, in his eyes, is saying, I have to do this. Superman yells, no! And Batman just presses the button and disappears. Goes to the past. And then that's when we see a scene of Batman in Darkseid's chamber. He looks down and he sees the deceased Barry Allen. And he walks up and he looks at Darkseid, and they have a monologue to each other. And sort of ends with Darkseid saying, but you need to remember, human, Darkseid is. And Batman's like, well, I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. And during this period, he's pulling out a gun. And it's the gun that killed his parents. And during this entire point, I would be hinting at a bullet or that a weapon that Orion created. It's the only thing that can kill Darkseid. But Bruce pulls it out and fires the gun. And at the same point, Darkseid does the Omega Beams. But the Omega Beams miss the bullet, and it hits Darkseid in the head. But at the same time, the Omega Beams hit Batman, killing him. And this is in homage to Grant Morrison's Final Crisis movie, or Final Crisis book, where Darkseid and Batman kill each other. And during the fight, when Superman is fighting Darkseid, Superman punches Darkseid as hard as he can. And when he does that, Darkseid just turns to dust. And that's when all the heroes look, and everything is turning to dust. All the members of Apocalypse are turning to dust, and suddenly greenery reappears around on New Genesis. They look up and they see Apocalypse, the fire disappearing, and all the new gods of New Genesis return. High Father, Light Ray, and others. And then Superman looks around, he sees his red and blue costume, and he looks over and he sees Batman's not back. He's like, Bruce, and he runs over to one of the teleporter things, and he goes back in time. He goes back to that moment, and he looks down, and he sees the broken, dead body of Batman. And we see him coming back to present time. John was with him, and he brought back Flash, but in the arms of Superman is the dead carcass and skeleton. We cut to a few weeks later, the funeral of Barry Allen and Bruce Wayne. Barry is buried in Central City, being mourned by Wally, by Iris, by anyone that could consider him a friend, which is every single member of the Justice League. And then Bruce Wayne is buried in Gotham with his parents. And we see every single member of the Bat family, Dick Grayson, Alfred, Barbara, all of the friends, every single member of a hero team is there in their regular identities, mourning Bruce Wayne. And then we cut to the next day, where Dick Grayson was asked to meet Alfred in the Batcave. So Dick is there alone, no one with him. And him and Alfred speak to each other about Bruce, about life, about what's next. And then Alfred hands him a USB drive. Alfred says, Master Bruce left a message for you. All you have to do is plug it in and hit play. So Dick plugs in the USB as Alfred walks back up to the Wayne Manor. He hits play. That's when we have Bruce saying goodbye, talking to Dick about every single mistake he's made, talking about how he would occasionally think of himself as a disappointment, but at the same time, he always thought about the one thing that he did right, and that was raising Dick. And it has Bruce talking about everything he did right with Dick, to make sure Dick was better than him, making sure that he wasn't the broken boy that Bruce was. And during this moment when he's talking about everything, we see clips of Wonder Woman on Themyscira, Aquaman in Atlantis. We see Wally sort of looking at everything and learning and sort of starting to run a little bit because he knew his uncle's identity. He knew everything about Barry. And then as he's running, we see a little lightning behind him, seeing that he's gaining the ability of super speed. We see Martian Manhunter being alone and flying off into the distance. We see the Green Lantern Corps on Oa trying to rebuild and be fixed. We see the new gods of New Genesis finally leaving the planet, or at least some of them finally leaving the planet to maybe have a life on Earth. We see all these things. Then we go back to the Batcave, and it's Bruce staring at the camera, telling Dick, I know I shouldn't put this burden on you, but Gotham will always need a Batman. But they don't need a Batman like me anymore. They need a Batman like you. fully hinting that Dick Grayson will be the next Batman. But then we cut to Lois Lane in her apartment, and we hear a knock at the door. She opens it, and it's Clark Kent, back from the dead. And Lois kisses him, and she says, "I'm so glad that you're still here." And Clark asks why. And then she lifts up a little pregnancy tab, showing that she's pregnant. And Superman smiles and hugs her. And that is the end of Justice League Rebirth. But that is not the end of Phase 3. And we go into the final movie of Phase 3, which is the analog to Spider-Man Far From Home, which is called The Power of Shazam. And for a lack of a better, quicker description, because this video has been going on for so long, it's just Shazam versus Black Adam. And it's Shazam ultimately, in the end, teaching Black Adam not to be a bad guy anymore. That is this movie. And yeah, the mid-credit scene is just Black Adam trying to fully get back into the swing of things, trying to be a good guy, but then he disappears. Why? You'll find out in Phase 4. And then the end credit scene is just the hint of the next bad guy, which is Mr. Mind. And that is Phase 3 of the DC Cinematic Universe. I did not expect this video to go this long, but when I was talking about Justice League Rebirth, I was just thinking to myself, I need to talk more and more about this particular movie, because this is the Avengers Endgame. That is the Avengers Endgame of the DC Cinematic Universe. And so I felt like Justice League Rebirth needed a lot more time, and it needed a lot more to be heard about, because I'm wrapping up, because just in the Justice League Darkseid War and Justice League Rebirth, I did the death and return of Superman, I did the death of Batman, I did the death of Barry Allen, I did so many things, and there's so much that I didn't mention that would have been like sort of smaller stories, and there was just, yeah, there's a lot. Phase 4 will have just as much, if not more, because of all the stuff that Marvel released, but I very much wanted to emphasize, like, hey, this is the end game of this universe, and I wanted to talk about a lot of points, specifically with Batman feeling guilt over the death of Superman. And I feel like that would be a bigger point if I would have had more time to fully plot this out. But yeah, that is my version of what I think Phase 3 of the DC Cinematic Universe would be. What are your thoughts on this idea? Again, I'm sorry it was so long. Post them in the comments down below. Also, hit the like button if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel, that way you'll be up to date with all the videos I have here. Also, hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. So until next time, which is the final video of What If the MCU was the DCCU, I've been Mr. EliMac. You've been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.